Jason, welcome to the Hubscale Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Just so our audience know, this is Jason Martin, who is the co-CEO of Series A identity security vendor, Permiso. And yeah, Jason, introduce yourself. Talk us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for feels like too long, approaching about 30 years now. Had a I've had the benefit of being in a bunch of different roles, both like IT operational. Started in a help desk out of college, and then got into security, network security, and then offensive security. Uh, Really enjoyed that. Breaking into companies at scale globally was fun, but you start learning quickly that breaking into things is pretty, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely easier than building entire security programs. So I got into enterprise security architecture. That led to my first CISO role, right? So I've got the ability to try to scale and build and then manage and operate enterprise security programs from day one all the way up to pretty well run and large scale enterprise security programs. And a lot of those insights led to me building my very first company, which was SecureDNA, which I subsequently exited to FireEye, and then various different roles we could talk about at FireEye leading up to Permiso.
Some awesome stuff. And yeah, I guess talk to me about the start of the journey at Secure DNA, where you were part of the founding team, obviously finished up as president and CEO before FireEye came and acquired you guys. Talk to me about the early days there and really getting that off the ground. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first was I think it's important to talk about why I started SecureDNA with my co-founders. And I had alluded to it a little bit in the intro was we'd started I'd started building and scaling enterprise security programs as a consultant. I didn't mention who it was. I was working for KPMG, which is a global accounting and consultancy. And as I was getting promoted within that company, I started to realize that myself, under my direction and my team, we were delivering, 99% of the work, ultimately with sign off of a partner in review. And there was some asymmetry in the compensation structure. You start realizing you're delivering millions and millions of dollars of value to customers and for the firm, and you're getting paid well. But you're definitely working for someone else. And my co-founder at SecureDNA, who's a really, really good friend to this day, we decided we were gonna, make the jump and try and start our own consultancy. And so we were, in our early 30s. He was in his late 20s, and we dove right in. People thought we were crazy. That's a common theme that founders run into, leaving that safety and structure of a really good company and culture at KPMG to go start something ourselves. But we, ultimately, as all entrepreneurs, you have to believe in yourself. So that was the genesis for starting that company. And then we quickly started to see other opportunities. As you go in and help customers solve security problems at a program scale, you see the gaps in not just people and process, but also technology. And so we started building complementary companies. So we had a managed service line that came out of that. We started doing focused IR and offensive work. And there was kind of a flywheel that benefited the different companies, right? You do an IR, they don't want you to leave. You do a managed service to service that need. Then we started really focusing on technology gaps that were in our customers' environments and in the managed service. Like we just didn't have visibility and telemetry into certain things we wanted. So we just started to build our own technology. And that was kind of a full service regional security consultancy. We started in Hawaii, and then we expanded into the US, continental US mainland, and Asia before we were acquired.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And talk to me about how you scaled that thing out and anything that you're able to share up towards the acquisition by FireEye. Talk to me about the heights of the growth of the company.
Yeah, it was that was a very different approach. We bootstrapped the entire company from start till exit, and obviously that has better economic benefits for founders, but it's a slower process. So as we made money, we took the money we made and poured it back into the business. And so that growth curve is slower. You still hit a hockey stick type growth at a certain inflection point, but the getting there is slower because you're not just pouring money into go-to-market, for example, right? And then a lot of the sales, if you are talking about professional services, are built around the expertise of the core partners and leaders of the firm. And so your people are your intellectual property, right? Your people are your assets. And so you have to, focus on building a great culture. You have to focus on taking care of them. You have to focus on making sure that they're part of it. Right? We left a big company because we didn't feel like we were part of the economic engine and rewards that were occurring. So we changed that, inverted that model, and just continued to, as we made incrementally, or, in some years we'd have really strong years, we'd just hire more people. So I think when we exited, we were at about 7 million in revenue. We had about, I would say, about 50 people. Some of my cost structure, and these are things I carried forward into FireEye and Mandiant and also into Permiso, was embracing internationalization pretty early. So this is back in, late 2008, 2009. We started to source talent in the Philippines. Great English speakers, super smart folks, and that helped balance out the cost structure, especially on like the managed service side and even on the consulting side. So I'm a big believer in that. Yeah, and then when we were acquired, what was interesting, and I think founders and folks that are building businesses need to keep an eye on this, is we were acquired by FireEye for specific technology we built to power our managed services. That technology itself was de minimis from a revenue perspective. Like it was not pulling in millions of dollars in ARR, but it solved a really discrete problem in a very specific, helpful way. And when the acquisition occurred, it wasn't for the book of business that we had built around the entire company. It was for that targeted technical asset and the team we built, which was a phenomenal team.
Yeah, amazing. Talk to me about the transition phase then, from when FireEye came, acquired you guys, and then you obviously got appointed VP of Cloud Security. Talk to me about the transition there in the early days at FireEye. How did you find it all?
Yeah, I think we were lucky because Dave DeWalt was the CEO of FireEye at the time. Ken Gonzalez was his head of corp dev. Morgan Kayak. They had done a lot of acquisitions. Between Dave and Ken, I would think probably, I'm going to get it wrong, 30 to 50 acquisitions in their career. And, being acquired is one thing. Being properly integrated is a totally different thing. And I was chairman of a board of a company that had a really rough integration when they were acquired. And so I've seen it, I can see how bad it can go. But luckily I didn't experience that, right? In my first acquisition, it was a team that knew how to integrate really well. Dave had this philosophy of autonomy, authority, and accountability for acquired companies. And so with that, he brought me in. The IPO happened about 3 weeks after we were acquired. And at that time, FireEye did not have a cloud business. And as a security company going public, there needed to be a cloud story. And I was given the task to go build out the cloud delivered portfolio for FireEye. So at that time, we were doing hundreds of millions of dollars of on-prem appliance business, and our customers were moving to the cloud, right? These are Five Eyes. These are, well, not the Five Eyes, mostly they're quasi cloud, right? It was things like C2S, but a lot of, large financial institutions, healthcare, big verticals had a cloud initiative, even if they weren't racing into it. So we needed an answer. And so I was tasked to be the GM of a business unit that had just started. And there was a lot of work there. It wasn't just about taking their existing portfolio and making it cloud delivered, because we're not talking about security for the cloud. This is security from the cloud. It was build a cloud operation first, right? When we went public, we had one data center. You can't run a cloud service with one data center. So, we started at the building blocks. We needed to build a DevOps team and SRE team. We needed to be in Europe and Asia with redundancy, and the United States with redundancy. We needed to start deploying into public cloud like AWS, right? We needed to build and scale an architecture that would support portfolio. And then once that base was there, we were able to start looking at the product portfolio itself, right? How do you take an on-prem email appliance and turn it into a multi-tenant cloud service? How do you take a network security device and have a cloud control plane, right? And these are the questions we had to go solve. Did that, worked on integration, worked on the milestones that we had for a team, and then was subsequently promoted to SVP, I guess, as cloud, as we successfully execute on the first part of the mission, was asked to take on a bigger role. We had done several acquisitions at that point, Mandiant, the iSight Intel business. And so it was more about like, okay, how are we going to build and scale their cloud properties for delivery from the cloud and things that we had to do there. And then ultimately, Dave asked me to come and run product and engineering globally for the company. And I think, if you think about where companies were at that time, right, they needed a leadership to try and transition from on-prem to the cloud. And it's a culture. It's not just a thing you do, right? It's not just we switch subscription models and do that. It's a culture. And we had built a pretty strong culture within that cloud business unit. And I think what he wanted ultimately was to bring that into the entire company and the entire product and engineering organization and transform it. And so that was what I did up until 2020. Spent a couple of years working for Kevin Mandia as our CEO when Dave transitioned out. And yeah, it was a really exciting adventure.
I find it very interesting about your background where you exited a company to FireEye and stayed in leadership there for so long, 6 years, when most founders, their business gets acquired, they'll either come out, retire, go on to the next startup pretty much immediately. Why did you stay with FireEye for so long and progress with those guys? Was it amazing people, amazing product? What was the reason that kept you there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So first of all, amazing leadership, right? I learned a lot from Dave DeWalt and the team that he had assembled. And then when he transitioned out, working for Kevin Mandia, I learned a lot working for Kevin and Travis and the team there. And I was just surrounded by, I think at my heart, I love security, right? I've written a few books about it. I ran a security conference for 10 years called ShakaCon. And I've gotten so much from security personally and professionally. And the mission that we have, right? Trying to keep the world safe from digital threats and bad guys and gals. That I was in the right place, right? I was in a home. I was at the best cybersecurity company at one of the most important times historically. And I really, really enjoyed that. And then I was given a mission that kind of aligned for a period of time, aligned with what, makes me happy, which is building products and product strategy, building culture and, real relationships with people, building strong teams. And I had that opportunity. I think where, okay, so why did I leave, right? I left because I started getting put into a position of having to do a lot of financial engineering. So as a public company, you have to manage margins, you have to manage growth. And if you're not growing fast enough, you have to cut costs. And so I started having to do a lot of layoffs, probably 7 to 9 reductions in force while I was the EVP. I had to try and build an exciting product strategy to keep a team motivated and in their seats, right? Because you're laying off people, but you're trying to tell other people that, hey, this is a really good opportunity still. We have the ability to go win. But kind of in a different way, I was also sitting there strategically. We were talking about rolling up the product business for sale to private equity or a strategic. And so I started wearing conflicting hats, and that made me very uncomfortable, right? And so I needed to be kind of true to myself. And then kind of to your question, like the core question, how does an entrepreneur sit in a corporate seat for, 7 years and not get an itch? The itch started happening, right? It started going like, I am no longer able to innovate how I want. People are like, how is this possible? You had 2,400 people, you're an EVP, you're a CEO direct report. Well, large organizations, they end up getting a lot of inertia, right? They cannot move. Like there's just this gravity of certain forces and you can't, and innovation becomes really, really hard. I'll give you a really good context that people have to think about. The reason big companies buy startups is because innovation is really hard. Why? Because if you're going to spend 2 years to build some new revolutionary product, and when it comes out of the gate, it's going to do 5 to 10 million in ARR in the first year, that's not accretive to the business enough for it to be meaningful, right? They'd much rather go buy product, buy a team that obviously knows how to win in a market they're interested in, and get some revenue right out of the gate, and then scale that motion directly into a sales force. Because at its heart, all these large cybersecurity companies or any large enterprise company are a sales force with things that they sell. And so the more things they can put in there, the better, right? So we just started seeing, hey, we can't innovate organically. We had some really cutting edge ideas about how to transform the space. Let's just go do it ourselves, right? Let's go out and take another swing at it.
Absolutely. I think that brings us very nicely on to Permiso, where obviously yourself and your co-founder and co-CEO Paul started this venture just over 5 years ago now. Why did you start it, and what was the initial couple of years like, getting this thing off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think there becomes a moment where you realize, okay, I'm going to leave, right? Maybe you've thought about it, you talked about, but you really feel that you're going to leave. And Paul had already Dave and I ended up buying Paul's company in 2016, and then he worked for me for a bit, and similar to what Dave did to me, but this time it was me and Kevin doing it to Paul. He he was at his earnouts. He could have gone out and taken another swing or retired, like you said, and a lot of options. Um, and we convinced him to stick around. So we said, hey, let's take a CEO, former CEO, and put him in charge of product management. And so he became the SVP of product management. Now, and then that allowed me to spend a lot more time focused on engineering, delivery, and R&D. And so we had to work together, and we built a really strong partnership. And he'd always say, like, if you leave, I'm gone. If you leave, I'm gone. And people say that, but like he really meant it. So the day I resigned, I think it was in August of 2019. He resigned the same day to Kevin. So Kevin had his head of engineering and his head of product resign on the same day. Now I ended up sticking around for about 8 months to help with certain things and stuff. So it wasn't that abrupt, but we had built a strong relationship, right? And effectively, if you're going to go, I'm going to go, and let's go do something together. And so we didn't have a strong idea at the time, but we knew we had been exposed to a lot of unique insights in our role, and we just needed time to step back from that. So, but I can remember it vividly. He had been in town. We had been doing a QBR or something. I resigned. He resigned. We went out that night to a hookah bar in Palo Alto. It's no longer there because of COVID. But we just sat there, neither of us smoke or anything that much, but we had a hookah and brainstormed. And in that, we started just trying to surface the insights that we'd been exposed to, because we knew they were there. And we knew a couple things were true. Cloud was only going to get bigger, right? That's easy. Anybody could predict that. We knew that the shape of the breaches that Mandiant, which is the best at the world at what they do, was changing in a couple meaningful ways. One was related to the cloud, right? The cloud is becoming more prominent in the breaches. Maybe it was in 5% of the breaches, then we'd see it in 10, then we'd see it in 15. Identity, which had always been targeted, right? Phishing has been around for a really long time. The shape of the identity was changing in those breaches, right? So we started to see non-human identities where secrets were being abused, right? Vendor supply chain through OAuth delegation was being targeted. The fragmentation of these environments, right? Mandiant would go in and it would be an on-prem IR. Maybe it was a large Active Directory setup, multi-country, complicated. But now you talk about going in and there's that setup on the on-prem side, and then there's 70 to 80 SaaS applications. There's multiple identity providers. So the complexity of the environment was changing. And then reflecting on what we had on the product side, we didn't really have any products we could give Mandiant for doing the investigation at scale. And very important when you're in an investigation is, how did I get breached? Am I still breached? What do I need to do to get this bad actor out of my environment, right? We couldn't help them solve that with any of their products. So we've started feeling there was a there. And so like good entrepreneurs, you have two former CEOs. We just started iterating on that. Like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And then in April of 2020, we started interviewing. We had an idea and we started talking to CISOs. And our idea was that to detect threats in the modern digital enterprise, so your cloud assets, your IDP, your SaaS, your IaaS, your PaaS, you needed to reinvent the way that that was done. Historically, everybody relied on a SIEM, and SIEMs are good for investigation. But to do detection, you need to be as close to the activity as possible. And so you had to build an engine that could do the contextualization of a SIEM, but at runtime in the cloud at cloud scale. And that's what we set out to build. And that was kind of the core founding insight. And the construct that you needed to protect, the way we landed on identity was it is identity. It's not about the workload. A little bit, there's the workload you have to protect in the cloud. There's network that you have to protect. But really the perimeters started to really consolidate around the identity, whether you talk about zero trust or other things. And that's what we focused on.
And talk to me about some of the differences that the platform has compared to some of the other identity players in the space and the total addressable market as well that you guys are going after. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, what was interesting was nobody knew there was a market, right? So we did 100 interviews, and I would say 96 people thought identity security was, I have single sign-on for most of my stuff. I have MFA, and then I have PAM and some secrets management for privileged stuff. And they're like, we're good. And so we try to talk about, our perspective. And they're like, well, that's why I have a SIEM. And we're like, try to do this in your SIEM and, it will break. So when this category unfortunately, cybersecurity is defined by categories. And that's why we have analysts like Forrester and Gartner and others. And we started to see an emergent category of ITDR, identity threat detection and response. There was categories like CDR, cloud detection and response. And ITDR in its kind of first generation was just focused at the IDP layer, right? And so we really fought that acronym for a long time because modern threats aren't at the IDP, they're not at the SaaS, they're not at the IaaS and PaaS layer, they are in all layers. And it's the identity that cuts through them all. And so, for the longest time, ITDR was just those vendors. We would say we do detection and response for IDP, SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS, using identity as a construct. So that gets you ITDR, that gets you CDR, that gets you SSDR, right? SaaS detection and response. It gets you all those things using identity as the construct. So what we've seen though over the last 4 years since we've been doing this is, it really came out of RSA last year. You saw this sudden understanding that identity was super important. It was kind of tied to AI, right? Now you had this super cycle of cloud, which we've had for 15 years, and AI, right? AI was going to be this whole new emergent thing. So we've seen a lot of competitors come in. Kind of to your question is, tons of people coming in, going after small parts of the space like NHI. They've tried to make NHI this thing, non-human identities. Look, like I said, I've been in IT and security for almost 30 years. Those are service accounts. Those are secrets. They're not new. They have a new moniker for sure. Don't like that. I don't think they're meaningfully different from a detection and response perspective. I do think there's a governance angle there that needs to be solved, but not for us as detection and response. We treat humans, machines, vendors all the same. But we are seeing, like, the good thing about competition, we're seeing more competition. It means there's a market there, right? There's investors who've acknowledged there's a market there. So they're funding startups. We're seeing incumbents make acquisitions. CrowdStrike bought Preempt to go build a strong ITDR capability. Then they bought Adaptive Shield to bring that capability into the cloud. You see almost every Palo Alto has a little checkbox plus ITDR that they do on their Cortex XDR. Silverfort just bought Resonate, right, to try to do this consolidated ITDR.
Cyber
So
just bought Zilla. There's quite a lot of M&A as well.
correct. And so M&A, good signal market is maturing. We're starting to see competitive. We just beat a vendor in a competitive bake-off. Wasn't really fair for them necessarily because they do detection and they did identity as an add-on, right? And so anytime you do an add-on, it's not going to quite beat a native platform. But we're seeing competitive. We're seeing RFIs now that are intelligent. So they have good questions, means that they're starting to understand how to ask the right questions. A few years ago, nothing, right? It was just white space. Investors are asking interesting questions now. It's not, the first 40 minutes of our discussion isn't about educating them about why this is a thing. Now it's more like, how are you going to execute, what's going to make it different? So they acknowledge that. The TAM is TBD, right? Like, in a slide deck, you can throw a TAM on there and a SAM, and you can try to, but the reality is the market today is largely unbudgeted, right? So you have to go evangelically sell. They have to recognize there's a problem. They have to go find budget. Not always easy, especially in these times. But I think it's going to be growing. And I think one thing we could look at is CrowdStrike. I'll get the year wrong, but I think CrowdStrike in 2028 or 2029 in forecasting calls has said that ITDR, or their identity security business, kind of writ large, will be $1 billion top line contributor by 2028 or 2029. Okay, that's pretty impressive, right? There's not many $1 billion lines of business in security, sustained lines of business, right? And so that they're already at 300 to 400 million in ARR off their on-prem. So they see it, they see the market, right? And so if you imagine they're going to carve out, 20, 30% of that market and by 28, 2029, then you have a multi-billion-dollar market to go after. And that's what we're focused on, right? I think there's roughly 3 categories in identity security. And everybody wants to try to be the platform to do it all. And that's never worked, right? And I'll say there's the governance side, right? And that's how you manage identities. And that's a big market. That's a huge market, right? And that's the Oktas and SailPoints and Saviynt's and Silver4, everyone else. Security is detection and intelligence. That's your continuous identity security. And then response. And that's your reactive. And if you think about how big that market is, I think it's going to be massive, right? And what's my analog? CrowdStrike did EDR first, and based on the success of their EDR offering and the brilliant move they did around managing it from the cloud, they built endpoint prevention. Now, they are not competing with other endpoint products in the governance of endpoint assets, right? There's several multi-billion-dollar companies in that aspect, and then they're dominating a endpoint security market. And identity has that same opportunity, right? There will be a multi-billion-dollar company built in identity security, detection, prevention, response, recovery. And there'll be billion-dollar companies, new generation companies built in the governance side of identities. I don't buy into the fact that one is going to rule all of those because I've never seen it in IT done successfully. So could be wrong, right? But
Let's see. Let's see over the next couple of years. Talk to me about how your business works then. Obviously, it's a very, very unique leadership structure that you have where there's 2 CEOs, you're the co-CEO who runs everything, product, tech, engineering, and then your co-founder, co-CEO, Paul, runs the whole sales, go-to-market, marketing, customer success side of it, right? So talk to me about how that works well for Permiso and some of its advantages and maybe some disadvantages that this model has.
yeah, it's funny. I think just last week there was a LinkedIn thread about this
I
asking.
saw it. I noticed.
Yeah, and someone, I think they said, "Hey, I ran into a few startups now that have this structure," and then it spawned, some entrepreneurs that have been through it and things, and a good discussion. But yeah, look, it came out of just really, I would say, this concept of ikigai, which is like what makes you happy, right? And there's what the world needs, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, etc. And if those things align, you find happiness. It's a Japanese. I'm not doing it justice. Go look and read into it. It's a very important philosophy to try to understand. Starting this out, if you've never been a CEO before, uh, everyone, wants to be a CEO. Not everyone, but a lot of people do. It's tough, lonely, scary, uh, very stressful. Um, and so having done it before, Paul having done it individually and myself having done it individually, we went into this and he had just kind of assumed I was going to be CEO. He's like, oh, I worked for you. And um, I think mostly just I'm older than him too, but he's like, you're going to be CEO, right? And I'm like, I don't really want to be CEO, to be honest, right? And I think you have to start everything on foundation of honesty. And he's like, well, I don't want to be CEO. And then we kind of landed on, well, let's co-CEO because the things I want to do and the things you want to do, there's actually like a yin yang alignment, right? Like we do complete the picture of what a CEO needs to do, but we can focus on what we want. As you said, like the line in the sandbox, and I'd say sand because it is a soft line, it's not a hard line, is I get to focus on product culture, strategy, engineering, the things that I like to spend my time on, and he gets to focus on go to market and chasing down, defining markets. He did that with SOAR. He was one of the first, if not the first SOAR vendor. So he's a little bit addicted to market creation and category creation, and that is dangerous, right? That's a dangerous space to operate in as well. It's hard. There's much easier ways to do things, but we both want those kind of challenges. It works well for us. If you go to my LinkedIn thread, you'll see. I don't think it works well for many companies. I don't think many startups should do it. I definitely don't think first-time founders should do it. And the benefit is double-headed dragon, right? You got East Coast, West Coast from a time zone perspective, so we have coverage for each other. We have coverage to be on a call with an important customer or on with a board member at the same time. We have the ability to talk and kind of multitask there. The team from day one, this has been the structure and the alignment of responsibilities has been clearly articulated and the decision making for the sectors of the business have been articulated, right? And that works really well. Now, the downside is I think, investors don't want to talk to mom and dad, right? They don't want to have to call two people to get consensus on something. The team doesn't want to have to do that, right? But they don't. Our team generally is able to move really quickly and in those separate. So it's kind of like having two speedboats that can go in, kind of alternating speeds. And then the important thing is Paul and I have to resync, right? I talked about left brain, right brain. We have to come back together and like resync. You have to sync go-to-market and product strategy together, right? You have to be able to understand that. So there's a sequencing there. And so there's that recalibration that we have where we come together. And definitely the benefit is just sharing some of the stress, right? And just having a safe place to do that. Because as CEO, you have to be on all the time when you're with your team. You can't let your guard down, right? But with a co-CEO, and maybe, even a co-founder, maybe titles different, president, COO, all those different structures. But it's good to have someone in the company that you can just let the facade down for a little bit and be yourself and then really talk through like challenges that the business is having and things like that. So we're both pretty low ego. I think that's why it works. And it works mostly because we worked on a bunch of hard stuff together at FireEye and Mandiant that built trust. And when you have that trust, you kind of like, all right, I'm comfortable handing the baton to him or her and then just, going away and being able to focus on what I need to focus on. So yeah, it's been really advantageous.
Super unique and sounds like it's working really well for you guys, which is great. What are the longer term plans and what are the longer term visions for Permiso maybe over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, really continue to, I think we are the leader in what we do. So taking that core, we did things a little bit differently. We spent 3 years building technology and not really trying to sell it. But just really focusing on development with our co-dev partners and early customers and build a really strong intellectual property-based technology platform. And now it's about extending our core use case into more areas of, frankly, IT and security and really continuing to dominate the identity threat detection from a thought leadership perspective with our P0 labs and the tools that we have, and then from our execution. And look, we just raised a Series A in January of last year. We just tried to start scaling go-to-market, right? Your early days are founder-led sales. You have to be able to do that. So now it's, can we take the money we raised from our investors and go and execute on go-to-market fit. What's hard to do, what I would say is challenging is, you've heard me allude to this, market is still forming, and it can form in a lot of different ways. So predictability of like, where is the company going to be in 3 to 4 years? Don't really know. We know what we want to do, right? And what we want to do is be the identity security company. And with our definition of security I talked about earlier is identity threat detection and intelligence and recovery and response capabilities, right? It's not so much on the governance side. We want to be the CrowdStrike of identity, and go after that. And now we have to thread the needle on, as the market matures, where we spend. There's a famous saying, right, in the go-to-market world of who has all the oxygen in the room, because they tend to get the attention. And what you see today with most startups is the way you get oxygen is what eats oxygen in a room? Fire. So you throw a bunch of money on a fire and you burn it, and that sucks up the oxygen in the room, right? That can be dangerous because it can also kill you. So you have to be able to make sure that room keeps growing and there's windows and doors that open up as a result of burning that money. And so we're a little bit slower. Like, we're very focused growth based on clearly articulated internal and external milestones to our board of, we will advance our spend in accordance with the growth of the business. We will not take huge swings on go-to-market if we're not seeing at least leading indicators that the market's maturing. And we do. Now we think, as I talk to, the market's starting to mature. So we're going to put more fuel into the engine and see what comes out the other side, right? And look, founders need to always think about this. You're just like you're A/B testing product and roadmap, you need to be A/B testing go-to-market strategy constantly, like as quickly as you do it in product side, right? Messaging, outreach, all those things it's very important, and pretty excited about how AI is going to help push the forefront there. But yeah, we'd hope to hit some of our internal milestones mid-year, look to raise a B towards the latter half of the year. We have plenty of runway. But you can't time a market, right? Being early, it can be just as bad as being wrong. So that's kind of our focus right now is threading this in-between period. If we get it right, I think we've got a rocket ship on our hands in the space, right? But you're not guaranteed to be correct. We're just doing everything we can to minimize the risk there through stuff.
Look forward to seeing what happens over the next 12 months for sure. And then finally, talk to me about some things you're doing on the side. You're a seed investor and think companies, right? Talk to me about the limited time you have left to do that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, it is. That's the key there, is limited, right? Time. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are. If you're Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, you can't buy time. So time is something I'm learning to try to protect as much as possible now. So I do some limited angel investing, and it's very focused on, usually I know the founders, or I've worked with the founders. They've worked with me or for me. And so I have a lot of already strong understanding of what they're capable of doing. And then I want to be able to give my time to them, right? So I'm not out there writing, tons of checks and just letting them passively sit. That's not my strategy. It is, advising and helping these founders. So the themes I like to invest around, obviously cybersecurity, cloud-related cybersecurity, or cloud-adjacent areas that I know are maybe their infrastructure or DevOps related, right? And then with my recent investment in embed security, it's how is AI and agentic AI going to transform some of the core processes and people related to security, right? And so embed is going after the agentic AI SOC problem, which I think there's tons of companies trying to go after that. But I believe that team has a very strong, there's a lot of engineers and AI folks going after the SOC. Why? Because it is a obvious problem. It's like going after a call center. right? It's like going after BDRs, right? It's like there is this human layer that, if given enough superpowers, could be done by AI, right? The SOC is absolutely that. This embedded security team, ex NSA, ex Mandiant, my chief scientist, and his co-founders, PhD in reinforcement learning with agentic focus. Like, these guys have the security background, they've got the AI background, and they're two of the smartest folks I've worked with, right? And they're going after that problem. So I want to be participate in that as well, right? And then you can see some of the others, right? Secrets, truffle security, secrets, not NH. Dylan will say the same thing I do, right? Which is, this NHI thing is frustrating because Truffle's been doing secret scanning for a long time, and those are now NHIs, and all these other secret vendors he was competing with are calling themselves now NHI vendors. So it's a branding game in the space, but resourcely, right? The way you deploy infrastructure into the cloud leads to security problems. The way you manage secrets leads to security problems, right? And those are some of the investments. And then Cove AI, just amazing team, right? The CEO built early Google, then built Uber Eats, the $25 billion business in Uber. The CTO and co-founder, brilliant, PhD in data science, was engineer one on Google Maps, went on and built a bunch of other interesting, successful companies. And I just love what they're doing. I loved early on that they saw, before almost anyone else, that AI use, like chat, was going to hit a usability barrier. And so they realized, maybe not so, it's kind of like Cursor, right? It's not the model. Cursor doesn't own the model, right? They use Claude. Cove doesn't own the models. They use Claude, but Cursor built a dev experience that was very familiar for developers to go use AI more proficiently in their workflow. Cove is building a UX that I think consumers, the normal consumer, is going to have an easier time interacting with AI. And I think that's the AI user experience is something that's going to be very powerful and solvable. So that was kind of how I calibrated those angel investments, at least.
Amazing stuff. Well, thanks so much, Jason. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and best of luck to Permiso over the next 12 months. I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to accomplish.
It was a pleasure joining you, Nathan, and I appreciate the insightful questions and stuff. So.